Hello everyone and welcome back to Seb's Garage. Today I've got some cool new parts for all you first gen Honda Fit drivers, and that is shift paddles for the automatic guys and girls. So even if you drive an auto, you can still do fun stuff, have a nice steering wheel, even have a deep dish wheel that comes closer to you since these don't have a telescoping column. So yeah, let me show you what this is about and let's get into it. So these are the paddle shifters that come on the automatic sport model GD3s. And I decided, why shouldn't the auto homies have fun? You know, if you're driving around and you want to put in sport and bang gears and just go pa 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 pa, or you know, because it's a Fit and it's very slow, you need to pass someone and you got to downshift real quick on the highway or something, you can do that and still have your aftermarket steering wheel. So usually these are on the back of the factory steering wheel. They would be right back here, you know, and you'd be driving around and you've got this big heavy thing and it's too close to the dash because the steering column doesn't move. What this kit will allow you to do is run an aftermarket steering wheel. You can get a deep dish wheel, or you can run a longer depth hub to bring that steering wheel up to a comfortable position, still keep all your functionality. This works with the cruise control bracket, which, give me a second, I've got one over here. So you get to use one of those too. And that guy goes right there, and you get to keep your cruise. So you can have all of your functions, minus airbag, and have a cool looking wheel that can feel better in your hand, a little bit more sporty, closer even for a better fit and driver position. So let me show you what the kit entails, how to install it, and walk you through the process on a non-auto fit. So you'll have to use your imagination just a little bit. So I'll be using a combination of my car and stuff that's out of the car already, just for ease. To show you exactly how all of this comes together and how you can have functionality of paddles and cruise on your car. First thing we're going to be doing is removing the old steering wheel. Before we can do that, we have to open the hood and undo the battery cable. So I'm going to reach right in there, pop this guy here, and then you can just undo your negative terminal, set it aside, and make sure it doesn't touch anything, because we don't want this airbag blowing up in your face. We want to make sure that there is no electricity going through the car, and then if anything happens and makes contact, that thing doesn't set off, because that could, you know, it is an explosive and it can be dangerous. So make sure that you take the battery out, or at least the terminal off the battery, and you let it sit for a couple of minutes before you start doing stuff. Alright, so let's pretend we are in the car. It'll be a lot easier for me to show you how everything works this way. So you're in the car, you're sitting down, you undid your battery, now it's time to do the airbag. The airbag has two T30 connectors on either side. There's one there, and there's one there, and there's also a plastic cover underneath which hides the yellow electrical connector for the airbag. Whenever you see a yellow electrical connector, that means it's part of the airbag system. You'll grab a little flathead screwdriver, and there is a little divot down here. You can get in there, twist it, remove that cover, and undo the connector from the airbag. It's got a little like black clip that you push back, and then things should split. Then you'll grab your T30 tool of choice. I have a little stubby guy. You might need something with a longer handle, because yours will probably be on there pretty good. You know, they are holding an explosive in place. So you'll get in there, go undo both of these bolts. Make sure not to lose them. It does help to have the key in the ignition so you can turn the wheel. And then when you undo the airbag, there will be an electrical connector for the horn, which is right down there. So you got to make sure that you do that. It's got a little plastic push pin, and it comes out, and you'll have your airbag assembly, which you can set aside in a safe place, so that if you ever want to go back to your steering wheel, you can. Alright, so your next step is going to be undoing the steering wheel from the car so that you can work on it on a bench, just like me. Makes things a lot easier. So there's a big 14mm bolt that will be right in the center, in there. And you're going to use an impact. That is usually the easiest way to go about it. You don't need to. as long as you have an extension and you can get a ratchet in there, you can do that. If it doesn't want to come off, you know, it's probably been on there for, I don't know, 15 years, however old these cars are. Thread the bolt in just a little bit, just like a turn or so it doesn't pop out and hit you in the face when it does. And what you can do is tap really hard on the outer edges, like, you know, whatever this would be, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I don't know what are clocks. And just smack the crap out of it, jiggle it side to side a good bit, and you should then be able to pull it. That method has never failed me. They do make dedicated steering wheel pullers. I've never had to use one with that method. You know, take out some of your anger or frustration, and you'll be set. Once the bolt is out, there will be a big white electrical connector right in that pocket. It's got one little pin that's like a locking tab. You push that in, pull it out. The steering wheel will come out with all of its wiring, and then you should be able to just pull the wheel out, set it up on a bench, and then what you'll have to do is undo all of the silver trim stuff. You'll see that this one is already removed. I've already removed all the integrated controls on the side of this wheel, and these have little Phillips screws that you can see right in there, and then there is also stuff on the back of the wheel. So just go through, undo all the little Phillips screws, get this all torn apart. You'll have some larger bolts for the paddles, but blow all of this apart. Make sure that you do keep all the hardware, and then what I do, as I've done with this one, is put it back together when I'm done, so that you can just have it in one place for safekeeping afterwards. And then by the time you're done, you should have the 2 paddles and the wiring harness left over. If you also purchased a cruise control bracket, you will also want to pull your cruise control module out of, you know, your controls out of your steering wheel. And then once you're done with that guy and it's all put back together and ready to be stored, we'll set that aside, and then we'll get into the kit. The cruise kit will be a different video, but it's pretty self-explanatory. 2 screws. Yours will have a little cutout, and that points towards the top. That means that is the top bolt, and that's the angle the bracket's supposed to be at. When you are looking at the wheel, it should be on the right side, just like that, just like it was on the factory application. But we'll put that aside. We'll continue talking about the paddle shift kit, which is the reason you're here. So you will have your paddles, and you will have your wiring harness, and all your factory components. The kit will consist of the bracket for the paddles. It'll consist of 4 spacers. You will have 2 backing plates, because I drop hardware. You'll have 4 button head screws. You'll have 6 extended steering wheel mounting bolts, and you will have 2 spacers. Again, the one with the little cutout on it goes towards the top, and the other one is for the bottom. And last but not least, you should have 2 tiny itty bitty zip ties. They are so adorable, and these will just hold the wiring to the bracket. The bracket's got little divots so that you can hold the wiring and keep it tidy once everything is installed. You'll notice that the bracket is offset, and that is on purpose. You did not get a messed up bent bracket. So you can have a handful of different steering wheels. I think they kind of fall in 3 different categories. You have flat face, which this is, it's pretty flat. Then you have deep dish, which is usually somewhere around the 3 to 4 inch mark. And then you have got mid deep, which is what I run on my black car, which is like a 50 mil, roughly 2 inch depth. The bracket is offset to work with all of them. So if you've got something that is a flat face like that wheel, you'll want the bracket pointing away so that you have some room for the button head screw heads to sit there and not touch the spokes, and you know, they won't have any kind of fitment issues. So you'll do the bracket facing away, the paddles will be installed behind, and then the wheel will go in front. Let's see if I can do all of this with one hand. So it'll be, I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but it'll allow clearance, and then you'll still have them nice and close to the wheel. If you've got a mid-deep, it'll depend on spoke location and how you want to do things, but you could do facing away and then the paddle shifter in front. or you could do it facing towards and the paddle shifter behind. And then if you've got a deep dish wheel, you'll definitely want it pointing towards the wheel with the paddle shifter in front to be closer so that you're not, you know, driving here and then your paddle shifters are over there like my turn signals are in my car, because I run a full length hub, a quick release, and a mid and deep wheel, and my turn signals are like, I don't know, a mile away from my steering wheel, which is kind of annoying. But you can run any sort of orientation with these to dial it in to your desired fitment, and that's why everything's so modular. That's why the backing plates and the little spacers are separate pieces. I could have made it into one thing, which I did try, but it didn't allow for the modular design, and you know, I want you to be comfortable. That's why I'm doing this stuff. I want you to have a cool looking car with cool looking stuff that you like, but also keep all of your creature comforts and, you know, little trinkets. So put it together in a way that best suits you, and I would recommend not to use the zip ties until you're completely done and have tested it, sat in the car, gotten in there, gotten a feel for it, and you think it's going to work best for you. You could change it a couple of times to see what works best before you actually get something that you think is right, and then you would have to be cutting the zip ties and whatnot. So leave the zip ties for the end, but yeah, let me show you how to put it together. So the easiest way I have found of doing this is doing it all on the bench. You'll notice I am using a quick release just because this is an extra one that I've got laying around and the easiest way for me to demonstrate this. But I would recommend not to be using a quick release with the setup just because you'll have so many electrical connectors that it's kind of, you know, missing the point of a quick release if you have to undo a bunch of electrical connectors to remove your steering wheel. But you could technically still pass the wiring by putting the spacer in the back. I just don't know that the wire links would reach or that it would look very tidy. Again, I would just use a regular hub because that is easiest. So you can see here, I've got a little green dot at the top of the quick release to know which one's up. That will line up with the top of the bracket. And what you can do to see what works best for you is kind of just stack them without having anything bolted just yet and see what works best. I already know which setup I'm going to use for this as I continue dropping more stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do the first step of assembly, which is going to be attaching the bracket and the paddles together. The easiest way to do this is to put the bolts through here first. Set that aside. Grab your paddle. On the back side of the paddle, you'll see that there's two big divots. Those will be filled by the spacers. So then, making sure the spacers don't fall out, you'll grab the bracket and put the bolts through. Now this part can get a little finicky just because everything's going to want to fall apart. So what I do is I grab the backing plate and I start spinning it on by hand just a little bit. Like that. And then line it up with the second hole, which you can grab your Allen and start tightening everything together. When you are tightening this, remember, you are tightening a bunch of plastic components, including the factory bracket. Yes, there's a metal sleeve in there, but you will crack these brackets if you over tighten. So you want to get it snug, just to make sure it's not going to be coming loose. But you don't need to go crazy with this because you can strip the plastic bracket and you can crack the factory shifters. You'll notice I'm grabbing this very close instead of using all the torque back here. I just want to make sure that it's nice and snug, and that's it. So we'll do that for both sides and then continue the process. Once you've got your bracket with both of your shifters on there, we can continue the next step. Now you can lay the wire in front or in back. The spacer will work either way, and this is yet another way to really dial in your exact fitment and how you want it. I'm going to go ahead and put it behind just because I think the wiring looks cleaner that way, and it also brings the bracket a little bit closer to the steering wheel for better fitment from what I think is best. But again, do what's comfortable for you. Now, doing all of these different brackets, especially if you've got the cruise bracket as an additional thing, you're going to be trying to juggle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different components and all the screws to get them in, and it can be a little tedious and a little bit of a pain. So I found that the easiest way to do this, again, is stacking it. Move the wiring out of the way. If you're using the cruise bracket, now is the time to lay that where it should go. This one goes this way. That one goes that way. And then the steering wheel goes here. And not to worry about the spacers at this time. So you're going to thread everything through. Just like that. And do at least 2 bolts. And barely start getting them threaded. Then you can lift the whole thing and place your spacer wherever you're going to put it. Now remember, it does need to go on either side of the shifter bracket. Mine's going to go behind, and you'll see that I have just enough movement here to snake that through. So you can snake that through, and then once that is through, I'm going to actually have to loosen this up just a little bit because I tightened that bolt too much. Once it's through, you can start adding the rest of the hardware and tightening everything in place. Alright, and once you've got the top 3 done and the top of the spacer is being held in place, you can come in, remove any of the bottom 3 that you had put in, grab that spacer and slide it in, and use the bottom 3 bolts and get everything nice and snug. Everything is nice and snug. Now if you are using the cruise control bracket, you will have to run the little bit of wiring that goes to the back of that before tightening everything in place, because that does need to run through the little slot in the bracket. I'm not using the wiring in this just because the quick release won't allow for it, but you will have to do that. After everything is together, you'll see that you'll have 2 holes in between the 2 spacers, which are large enough to push the green connectors through. And again, depending on how you have everything set up, you will either have these all the way in or hanging out down here, or however you need just to have your spacing work properly. But at this point, you would go ahead and install this in the car, tighten up the 14mm bolt, and make sure that it's centered. You might even want to go take it just for a quick lap around the block to make sure that this is centered before we move on to the next steps. Now that you've went ahead and gone for a little bit of a drive and you know for a fact that this is centered, you can get onto the actual wiring portion. If you've got the cruise bracket, there will be a green plug that goes on the back there. If you've got your 2 green plugs, you'll want to make sure that the one going to the left is going to the left and the one going to the right is going to the right. These paddles do have a minus and a plus, and you want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. I do think that the plugs will plug into either one, so just make sure you don't have that backwards on the harness. Again, you can test that, go on for a test drive, making sure everything works as it should. Then you'll have the factory tab for the horn. You can put the horn in place, and at that point, you'd be done. Once you know your wiring is set, you can use the zip ties. Obviously, you won't be able to turn your steering wheel around like this, but you can fish it through the spoke or between the spoke and the bracket. Make sure it falls on the divots. Tighten your wiring out of the way. And then what I like to do is either using a razor blade or some snips. You can cut this nice and flush. You won't be catching your hand on it. And then you can put in your horn button, and you're all set. And then we can pretend that this isn't stick shift and go from park to sport and enjoy our paddles. Enjoy a steering wheel that's more comfortable and a better seating position. So that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.